from an economic perspective, would you mind to take us through what's the difference of the two?
Well, this obviously is not a sudden thing. The president has been working on this for a long time. It's a bit like 2018 when he produced the transitional stabilization plan. Do you remember? 300 pages. And that was available on day one. This president has been preparing for this for some time. With the 105 odd state corporations that we have, there are many which are simply not productive. They're not making money. They have substantial assets. I mean, the total value of these 20 odd corporations that have been put into Motapa must be at least 5 billion. And so what he's done is he's taken them away from line ministries. And the line ministries were not doing a good job. And he's consolidated them into one enterprise under the Ministry of Finance. Potentially, if he does the right things with this organization, if he appoints the right people, the right kind of board, the right kind of management, I think potentially this has a real possibility of transforming Zimbabwe. If they can, I'll just give you one example. Take Wankie Colliery. Wankie Colliery probably has about $3 billion in coal reserves. Okay, it has the best quality coal in Southern Africa, Wankie Colliery. It's losing money. It hasn't made money for years. If he was to reprivatize that, even partially, in other words, retaining some shares inside the wealth fund, but selling the majority of the shares in that organization back to the private sector, and if he put professional management in control, or the private sector put professional management in, we could put Wankie Colliery back on its feet tomorrow as an internationally traded entity. It's registered on the London stock market, it's registered in South Africa, and that would then create a huge asset which would then boost the resources of the wealth fund. And that's just one tiny part of the whole thing, net one. You just look at all the different, look at ZPC. ZPC owns Kariba. I mean, Kariba must have a net worth today of $2 billion easily. What if he sold some shares in Kariba? Huh? And that would create funds inside Motapa, which would then be available for other opportunities in Zimbabwe. So I think this was a very good move, and I think that the early signs are that they're going to appoint new management and new boards.
But critics of it are saying that it's an elitist method of management in terms of it has been shielded from scrutiny. It has also been shielded from other interlocutors coming in. It's being, some are saying it's a private method of looting by the state.
Well, this argument that it is potentially a new source of looting by the state, I don't agree with that. All these organizations have been looted by the line ministries that were running them, all of them. You take ZESA in the hands of Ministry of Industry and Commerce. What have they done? Nothing in 20 years. And we have invested as a nation billions of dollars in Zisco. I mean, Zisco was at one stage the largest steel company in Southern Africa. And that's just one example, but there are many. All of these institutions these organizations we moved across Motapa have huge potential. And if it's managed correctly, and that's always the case. I mean, look in South Africa, Transnet, Eskom. They were amongst the best, Rand Water. They were amongst the best state-owned and run corporations in the world in their heyday. And they've been wrecked by incompetent management, corruption, political interference. This gives the president a chance to reform the way all these institutions are managed and to semi-privatize them. I don't share the pessimism. I think that this is a very clever move, and I think it could be part of the president's legacy when he leaves power before the next, leaves presidency, retires before the next election.
How could it be safeguarded against scrutiny? Yes, you highlight that all other institutions have been written before.
Yeah.
Probably this was the method to try and bring in all the assets, make them valuable, one or the other. But how could it be safeguarded against the fears of looting?
The only way to do that is to appoint people in there with integrity. If you appoint a crook to run a big institution like that, he's going to use it for his own purposes. You've got to have the right people. I mean, we've got plenty of good people in this country who can run organizations. You know, you look around you. We've got corporations here that are world class. Take Zimplats. Zimplats is probably one of the top mining companies in the world. You can take people to Zimplats from anywhere in the world, and you can show them a mining organization that is highly profitable, 100% run by Zimbabweans. There are no expatriates in Zimplats. None, not one. Not an engineer, not a geologist. It's 100% Zimbabwean run. And that's not isolated. Mimosa, Delta, Inscore. Inscore is now our biggest company. It's 100% Zimbabwean managed and financed. And it's already an African conglomerate. You know, we're not short of people who can run these things, but you've got to have the right people.
But looking at the method that you've used in terms of appointing, you are very clear there.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah.
But looking at the history in terms of appointing people of repute,
Sure.
do you believe the president will be up to task to ensure that you have got a better relationship with him?
Yes.
And you probably understand his mind to a large extent.
Yeah.
Do you believe he'll be able to appoint people who are up to task, both credibility and aspect-wise?
What I've seen, I mean, I've been working with Emerson since he took power in 2018. What I've seen of the man is I think he wants to do the right thing. But you know, a president always has to deal with the political forces that are at work in his party. Certainly in his first government, from 2017 to 2018, he did not have full control. Mbora Masango was a major player in all the elections, even recently, and that is a problem for him. He does not have total consensus in his party on the policies that he's pursuing. Many of his people think, you know, it's our time to eat, and he's got to manage that. The big thing about him now is he's fully in control after this last election. And I think that he's going to clean up his game. I would not be surprised. I mean, the appointment of Mrs. Moyo as the Prosecutor General was a huge signal. She's a tough, competent lawyer with an excellent track record. And I think we're going to see these people who've been sheltered by the corrupt elements in our judicial system and in the police and so on. We're going to see those people prosecuted now effectively. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. But it's not easy to be president. It's not easy.
Maybe let me dwell in on something very important.
Yeah.
I want us to zone in on the issue of competence.
Yeah.
Because the success of Mutapa, as you rightly put,
depends on competent people being appointed to manage it.
And we want to also look at the caliber and the state of the president. Very important. We have seen him appoint Angel to lead the investment ambassador role. It was controversial.
Yeah.
We hope that probably would leave him the post. Unfortunately, that never happened.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that he will, this time around, with, as you say, he is now probably a better attitude than he was in the previous,
Yeah.
government.
Regime. Yeah.
That now he's got a comfortable, I would say, leadership or mandate. You'll be able to be very tough.
I hope so. I mean, I hope that he draws on the resources in the diaspora. I've seen in recent weeks that, in fact, they are recruiting in the diaspora. I mean, if you go to South Africa, who's running the private sector in South Africa? Zimbabweans. You go to MTN, Zimbabweans. You know, you go to all the major corporations, all the major banks. You go to Washington, go to New York, more go to New York. The number of Zimbabweans who are working there in high positions is just astonishing. You know, our guys, when they go abroad, they succeed. So I think we've got to bring some of those people. Some of them are coming back, and I think they've got to be appointed to key positions because they bring back with them their competence, their experience, working for major corporations in the West. And I think if he wants to succeed, he knows very well what he's got to do. His cabinet has been heavily criticized. The appointment of two sons to positions of vice president. Both of those men are reasonable guys. I mean, the one in the Ministry of Finance actually has a good reputation. But nevertheless, I think that's a mistake. Because irrespective of how competent his sons are, it's a dangerous thing. I mean, if I, as a chief executive of a corporation, started appointing relatives to key positions, it would be a disaster in 5 minutes. Doesn't matter who they are. And so I was always very careful not to be involved in that. I was always very careful to choose the right people for subordinate positions to myself. And the president has to be very careful about that, but it's done. We just have to wait and see.
Let's now dwell in on the issue of the operation of the sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
In your view, some are saying it's a short-term fund to try and compared to the sovereign wealth fund. Give an analysis of it.
The whole purpose of a sovereign wealth fund is to collect money that's surplus to requirements. Zimbabwe is not in that position. I mean, Norway has a sovereign wealth fund because they're an oil producer. So when they're producing oil for $5 a barrel in Norway, and you're selling oil today for $100 a barrel, $95 profit. You're stupid if you don't take some of that money, you don't eat it, you put it into a fund. So Norway has the largest wealth fund in the world. Saudi Arabia, the same. UAE, the same. Okay? But you've got to have, Botswana never did it with diamonds. Botswana has managed their diamonds very, very well. And as a result, there's no taxation in Botswana, or limited taxation, and education is free in Botswana because it's funded by diamonds. But they're not keeping any reserves in Botswana. So when the diamonds run out, which is going to happen eventually, they're going to be in trouble. Okay? Here, because we don't have those, so what they thought was they might impose royalties. But the problem is, we have a small economy, we have an even smaller tax base, but we have 14 million people. We've got to educate our children, we've got to provide medical services. We can't afford to do that properly. So we have to spend the resources that we received as a government. We have to spend them. We have to spend them on infrastructure, we have to meet the urgent priorities, education, health, and so on. So we have nothing left over. And so the only thing we have, this is the wealthiest country in the world in terms of natural resources to population. So we've got these 20 organizations. Collectively, they control very substantial natural resources, very substantial. So he's put them into, and he's not called it a wealth fund, he's called an investment fund. And I think that is a good change, because it moves it out of that sphere of accumulating surpluses over time for future use. And it gives us control at a centralized basis of these vast resources. Now he's got to put proper management in. So, for example, if he was to put my example of Wanky Colliery, if he was to put that back on its feet and bring in guys who are been working in the diaspora to run it as a private operation, with the wealth fund, with Mutapa Holdings as a minority shareholder, still the elephant in the room, you can't ignore them. If that fund says, hey, you're not doing the right thing, then they've got to listen, okay? It gives them a veto because of who they are. But it would be run by professionals. It was Zimbabweans who ran Anglo Coal in South Africa. You know? We've got people who can run this with one hand tied behind their back. They know exactly what to do. And if they were appointed to run it, it would give the international financial community confidence. And I think that's what he's going to do.
Let's cross. Last on this issue.
Yeah.
In your view, here we have Zida
Right.
trying to sell Zimbabwe to the foreign investors to try and market it.
Yeah.
You have the Mutapa
One-stop shop.
They've got the Mutapa investment fund. Separate the two.
No. Zida is purely and simply about investment, foreign and domestic investment. So if you have a project in mind, you can take it to Zida. They'll appoint an executive look after you, and that executive will see to it that you go through all the different agencies. You deal with tax guys, you deal with the company's office, you deal with this. If you need permits, they deal with it. It's actually a very good idea. It means that when a foreign investor flies in here and wants to open a mine or wants to put in industry, that they've got somebody they can go to in government with real power, because they sit in the president's office. And there's a committee, a committee of senior officials who look after Zida. It's chaired by the Secretary for Finance. So I think Zida is a very good idea. Previously, this was fragmented. So I came in and I had to form a company, and I had to do this, and I had to get exchange control for that, and I had to get recognition for the money I was bringing in to protect it, and so on. It would be a nightmare. It'd take you months. Now you can do that sort of thing in weeks. And but Zida can't sell Zimbabwe. We can. It's the ordinary Zimbabwean. It's the ordinary businessman here. I mean, you know, when the chief executive of Zimplats goes abroad, he is given real respect. Why? Because he's managing an enterprise worth $2.5 billion. He's making several $100 million a year in profits. He's paying dividends to shareholders outside the country and shareholders here. And you know, other businessmen around the world look at that and they say, but how did you do this? And BHP Billiton, biggest mining company in the world, tried to get established here, and they failed because they got the geology wrong. Now here's a Zimbabwean company. Here's a Zimbabwean enterprise with Zimbabwean geologists who got it right. And they taught BHP Billiton, biggest mining company in the world, a lesson. Do you think that's not recognized? Let me tell you, that's a big story. It's a big story around the world. It's also the cheapest source of platinum in the world. And it's like lithium. Zimbabwe is going to be producing 25% of world demand for lithium in 18 months to 3 years. And the international community is going to look at this and say, but how did they do it? How did Prospect Lithium, just outside town here, take 900 hectares of bush, of farmland, and today they're exporting 1,000 tons of lithium a day? 12 months later. How did they do it? Who did it? wasn't done on the moon. It was done here in Zimbabwe. You take Verum Enterprises, Pepsi, voted the best Pepsi distributor in the world. And Pepsi is bigger than Coca-Cola. And they've just won the prize for the best Pepsi distributor in the world. A foreign enterprise invested here. They invested 50 million. Now they've invested 200 million. And they're going to invest more. And they're making money here. Now that's an Indian multilateral. Do you think that's not watched? Of course it is. And they're making Zimbabwe their manufacturing hub for the region. They're thinking about going into South Africa. South African Pepsi might be a subsidiary of Zimbabwe. And those things are watched. Those things are observed by the international community, by the business community around the world. And that's what sells Zimbabwe. That's what sells Zimbabwe as an investment destination. That's why our mining industry is booming. It's booming.